Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the only podcast for February 19th, 2015. I am Chris Vernini, your host, and I'm joined, as always, by Joe Toohey, the managing editor of theonlycallers.com. Uh,
Hey,
hey, we're going to talk about mostly MSU basketball here after what was a pretty good week for the Spartans since we last spoke. Joe, how are you doing this evening when we're recording this?
I'm doing well. Yeah, the it's much easier to live in Ann Arbor when the sweep happens, right?
Yeah, how is that? I mean, I can't imagine you're going out very much with this weather, but to
Yeah, I mean,
walk around
there's
town.
it. I will say like the trash talk has always been pretty weak. The When Harbaugh got hired, there was an uptick, but that'll settle down probably until football season, I would guess. But yeah, I mean, there is some now and again, mostly good-natured ribbing. Like I feel like if I was living in Columbus wearing MSU gear around all the time, it would be a slightly different atmosphere. But yeah, I mean, in terms of being an MSU fan, not so bad.
Yeah, and Harbaugh was there at the game, eating some what looked like delicious Pizza House pizza, sitting next to John B on there. I was almost more jealous of the pizza than the seats he had.
Yeah, for that matter, I mean, I didn't go to the game yesterday, so I didn't have pizza either. So I guess I had the worst of all scenarios. But it's of course the image of Harbaugh eating Pizza House next to Urban Meyer with some Papa John's after the 2013 Big Ten championship game already surfaced. That's a pretty good one.
Yeah, and not only did he look happier, the pizza was a lot better, I'm sure.
Oh, no question.
Pizza
Yeah.
House over Papa John's every day. But before we get into the MSU Michigan game from Tuesday night, the Spartans had a pretty really big game on Saturday on Valentine's Day against Ohio State, where Denzel Valentine hit the three-pointer with a couple seconds to go to give the Spartans a 59-56 win and bring all sorts of legitimacy to all the Valentine's Day puns throughout the day, and they very much continued after the game there. But it was a really back and forth affair. Seemingly every single MSU Ohio State game at Breslin comes down to the last possession, and 11 Warriors did a look at the rivalry recently, and I think Izzo and Thad Matta have met 22 times, I believe, and I'm pulling it up right now just to double check that. Yeah, they've played 22 times. They've split the games 11-11. And not only that, but Mike Haslett, an MSU fan, noted that Ohio State has scored 1,433 points in these 22 games, while the Spartans have scored 1,432. So a 1-point differential in the 22 games between these teams was an even record, which is just remarkable. And it really, these two programs since Thad Matta arrived have really been pretty much equal. They've kind of mimicked each other a bit. A number of Big Ten championships, a couple of Final Fours each. Although the Buckeyes have generally done it on the backs of younger players, while the Spartans have done it generally on the backs of veterans. But once again, another crazy game that came down to the last shot, pretty much. And I guess Joe, to start off on this, what was kind of your takeaways from that game?
Well, I mean, it was sort of a flipping of the narrative that had sort of cropped up, which is that MSU couldn't finish out a close game, and that's exactly what they did. I mean, there was a relatively large lead that sort of decreased in size over the course of the second half, but just in general, I mean, I thought they did a good job of running set offense late in the second half. I liked that Tom Izzo didn't take a timeout before that Denzel Valentine three. And, you know, it also helped that Ohio State went 38.5% from the free throw line. So it was sort of a reversal of a lot of those narratives that had sort of crept up over the course of the season.
MSU didn't exactly help. MSU went Oh, I had these backwards. 4 for 7, but and all of those were from Costello and Dawson, so they didn't exactly kill themselves the line. But yeah, the Buckeyes pretty much did what Michigan State does and left a whole lot of points on the board from the free throw line, going 5 for 13, including 0 for 2 from D'Angelo Russell and 1 for 4 from Sam Thompson. So these are guards. These aren't like big men like MSU had been getting to the line.
Yeah, the one thing, if you had told me that we would have gotten out rebounded by Ohio State, I would have told you that we had lost big. And that's exactly what happened. We got out rebounded, but still won. Shooting 46.7% from three really covers up a lot of those deficiencies. But yeah, I mean, considering Ohio State played a very, very Michigan State style game, I think.
Yeah, and for the Spartans, Dawson, 15 points, 11 rebounds, 4 assists, 5 blocks, and only 1 turnover, and 3 for 5 at the line, which is actually an improvement for him. So he was a big key in that game. Although I think the story out of that game, other than Valentine's shot, really seemed to be Lou Rawls' Tum Tum Nairn Jr. went 3 for 3 from the floor. Scored 7 points, 4 assists, 2 turnovers, hit the first three-pointer of his career. He'd only attempted 3 on the year heading into that game. Played 36 minutes and really was a spark plug for this team. Really helped them get out on the fast break. Played pretty good defense. And he was the type of player, I think, at the beginning of the year we thought he could turn into later this year as he got more comfortable, as maybe he got some more minutes where he's that energy guy, can really help them get out on the break, which is what this offense needs to do because they're not very good in the half court. He was probably maybe the unsung hero, although he was pretty sung, I guess. But Denzel Valentine went 5 for 9 from 3, game high 17 points, including the 3 at the buzzer. What did you think of Tum Tum in this game? This seemed to be he's been starting the past few games, but this Ohio State game kind of felt like the first real coming out performance for him.
Yeah, I mean it's tough, right? To and right now I was just actually looking up some plus minus stats, but it's tough to sort of quantify exactly his impact, which is difficult for me at least to sort of resolve in my own head. But yeah, it does seem like this team is a lot more comfortable when he's whipping the ball around on the break like that. And what's been interesting too is that even in these games where, and for the most part, this is a team where very many of the field goals come assisted, where turnovers end up being pretty high as well. So what has happened in the last couple games with a low turnover rate, but with a lot of assists still occurring on a lot of these made field goals, is just, and I'm not sure exactly if that is correlated towards Tum Tum starting or what, but it also helps, yeah, when he's knocking down a couple open shots to make defenses respect him to some degree. I mean, I'm not sure that teams are exactly concerned all the way around with him. But
no, well, that's the thing. They're still playing off him very much so, and the fact that he's clearly not comfortable shooting from deep, but the fact that he's still having an impact offensively despite basically being played off of is also, I think, a testament to how he's been playing. Heck Dorland noted after the Ohio State game that this is before the Michigan game, but at the time, Nairn was shooting 51.5% from the field in conference play with 23 assists and 8 turnovers, and you couple that with Trice's assist to turnover numbers and what Valentine can do, and you've got times when they're playing 3 point guards at once, and this is this has been a very, very good passing team, and I don't think it's a coincidence when you see lineups with 3 point guards on the floor. And I think at the time, or maybe before the Michigan game, MSU had the 4th highest percentage of assists on made field goals in the country. And they're near
yeah, it's still It's still top 10, certainly.
Yeah, yeah. So I think Tum Tum's emergence there, maybe not as a scorer, but a guy who, it's kind of hard to quantify. And you know what, actually, our friend Matt, who recently joined The Only Colors as a writer, he has been keeping track of plus minuses, I believe. He sent me the Valentine plus minuses today, so he probably has the Nairn plus minus, which would be really interesting to look at in conference play. But on Valentine, though, while we're kind of talking about these three guys, if you were to think who's been the most valuable player to the Spartans this year, you could probably make a good case for Trice. You could probably make a good case for Dawson. I think Valentine may have the best case because you can't see it over the audio, but Matt sent me the plus minus of Valentine, and his 8 worst. Here are his 8 worst games in terms of plus minus. Maryland minus 15, Duke minus 8, at Nebraska minus 4, home versus Maryland minus 1, Kansas 0, Notre Dame plus 2, and Illinois plus 2. And those 8 worst plus minus performances are MSU's 8 losses this year.
Right.
As he goes, the team pretty much goes. Although it wasn't necessarily the case against Michigan, actually. But on the year, he's pretty much been the guy. If he's doing well, team's doing well. If he's out, if he gets in foul trouble, I think Kyle Austin from MLive noted that. MSU is 2-6, I think, when Valentine gets 4 or 5 fouls. So that means when he's sitting due to the fouls.
Yeah. So there's a lot of noise in there, right? Part of it too is just basically anybody who's playing a whole lot of minutes is going to have good good plus minuses, right? Just because they're in the game all the time. The thing we can't do yet. Is that we can't do regression using these plus minus. This means that we can't isolate a given player away from everything that he's done. Mm-hmm. The one thing you can do, so Heck actually tweeted this too, talking about where you can find that plus minus, those plus minus stats, and Stat Sheet actually has on their player pages plus minus for every game. And they do one thing that I like as well, which is they do a Roland rating. And what a Roland rating is you take your on-court plus minus and you subtract your off-court plus minus. So it gives you an idea of when that player was on the court, but also when that player was off the court, how the team was doing. Mm-hmm. And so to me, that's a little bit more descriptive, although it still has some parallels to it. But the plus minus that Tum Tum posted in the last 2 games against Ohio State, he had a 7, and against Michigan he had a 4. The Roland rating that he posted in those 2 games was an 11 against Ohio State and a -5 against Michigan. Again, I think a lot of what happened there was when MSU was making their push at were the times in the Michigan game when Tum Tum wasn't playing, and then he was playing more during that second half when Michigan was making a little bit of a push. So, yeah, I'm still undecided on exactly how I feel about Tum Tum specifically, and whether or not his insertion into the lineup is what's making a difference here, or if it's just that we're shooting better from 3. I mean, when you shoot 47% like we did against Ohio State, that really covers up a whole lot.
So. I think, and this is just kind of more feeling and eye test stuff, but I think his ability to push the tempo, even if it's a split second quicker, just makes a difference in how this team attacks and how energetic they are. The first points they got in the game against Michigan were a Forbes layup on a Nairn fast break push, and that's not, Trice isn't exactly slow at doing that, but when Nairn's pushing it leaves Trice as a shooting option too. And I think you saw MSU. You've seen MSU get quite a number of fast break threes. They're really good at spacing the floor and getting fast break threes. It's something that Denzel Valentine really likes, and Trice too. But again, I don't have numbers to quantify it, but it just feels like in the last 2 games, with his assist to turnover numbers. He's taking care of the ball, and he's able to push the tempo, and I think that's exactly what Izzo wants out of him. He's not expecting a whole lot more. So, I mean, it's not to say he's the difference between winning and losing, but I think he's been a help. So now we look at that Michigan game. Spartans jumped out to a big lead very early on in this one. Really took the crowd out of it from the get-go. Dawson had some alley-oop dunks. They had a barrage of three-pointers in the first half. I think they missed their first 5 and made their next 4. Got the lead to 15 at halftime, and then after that, it was pretty much the lead stayed right around there. Kind of went between 15 and 10, and Muhammad Ali Abdur-Rahman from Michigan, I think scored the first 10 points of the second half for Michigan after missing much of the first half due to foul trouble again. I'll get more into that a little bit later. But Michigan was hitting their shots. I think they had over 1.6 points per possession in the second half there, but I think MSU was about 1.4. And my kind of lasting impression from this game was every time Michigan got a bucket, State would always answer. It got down to 10 a couple times, but I'd actually sent out a tweet during the game that you just had the feeling it was going to get to single digits, and then the crowd would get back into it, and it would be interesting to see how the energy shifted. But MSU never got it to that point. They answered every single punch that Michigan threw in that second half and kept the lead, kept them at arm's length, and it never ended up getting to single digits. Got to 10 a few times, but stayed in the double digits, and they just held on for the end. What were your impressions of this of the game in Ann Arbor?
Basically, the interior, Dawson, Costello, and Gavin Schilling all sort of played out of their minds offensively. They were a combined. So Costello and Schilling were combined 8 for 8, and Dawson was 10 for 12. So combined, they were 18 for 12.
And one of those misses was a gimme dunk that he basically dunked too hard.
Exactly. So, that's the sort of interior dominance that I was expecting against Michigan in East Lansing, and I'm not totally sure still exactly how that happened, or didn't happen in East Lansing. And from Dawson, I'm still a little skeptical of his shot selection at times. He was making that turnaround fadeaway against Michigan, but I'm not sure that that's going to be a consistent shot that he's going to be able to make, in the long run.
No, it's never been consistent, really, and he hit most of. I think he hit most of them, all but one of them on Tuesday. It's something he's got. He does a good job, I think, of getting a position where it doesn't get blocked. I think he's got good body form on it, but his shot itself is, sometimes it's in, sometimes it's not. And not only that, when he shoots that shot, it takes away himself as a offensive rebound possibility.
Yeah, and the interesting thing too about Dawson is that he had 4 assists in both games, right? He had 4 assists against Michigan, certainly, and then he had what did he have? Did he have a full 4? Yeah. So that's a really good sign going forward. Is that even when we're operating our offense through him in the post, it's not necessarily just a black hole, which is really helpful, I think. Generally, so in the 2 games combined, he had 8 assists and 2 turnovers, and that's huge.
Yeah, and actually, talking about the front court, MSU went 25 for 32 on twos, and they rebounded 4 of those 7 misses. So, it was just I don't care who you're playing. That's a remarkable number, and it was a big part of MSU keeping Michigan at bay in the second half. When they did miss, they generally got it back. I think they went what were they at the free throw line in that game?
12 for 17.
12 for 17. I think they rebounded until the end. At one point, they were, I think, 2 for 5 from the free throw line with 2 offensive rebounds on the misses. There was a back-to-back possessions Schilling got 4 points on a possession once, and there was another one I think on a Costello miss or something like that. But
that 4-point possession was big too, because the lead was 10 points at that point, and the crowd was on the edge of getting back into it. Without that 4-point possession, came away with no points there, or even with just 2, could have gotten a lot more interesting. And like you said, I expected that to happen. It was on teetering on the edge, and I thought that it was a good strategy by Beilein to start fouling when he did pretty early on, just to see what happened. And to our credit, the guys shot 10 for 12 from the free throw line down the stretch there, and so again sort of turned that narrative on its head a little bit. I mean 12 for 17 is nothing to write home about, but it's still 10 percentage points higher than average for this team.
Yeah. And speaking of Beilein, I mean the guy's obviously a fantastic coach, and even with all the stuff he's done what he can with this Michigan team. But we talked about this after the game in East Lansing, but the auto bench of Abdur-Rahman, I think, again, really came back to haunt them. Pulled them out on a blocking foul early in the first half, and that's when MSU went on its big run, as it did in East Lansing, and pulled the lead. And Drew Hallett at Mason Brew looked at the numbers. In the 2 games this year, Michigan was plus minus. They were +7 with Abdur-Rahman on the floor. I think -30 with him off the floor. And you saw what he did in the second half. He came in, he scored first 8 or 10 points or whatever, and kind of got Michigan going. And when he's a guy that we've talked about the auto bench before, and it's a little bit different. What makes it different, I think, than the MSU guys is that you've got Schilling and Costello, who are normally in foul trouble, and it happened again in Ann Arbor, and you had Colby Wallman play a little bit. But Costello commits 4.8 fouls per 40 minutes. Schilling's at 5.9. Meanwhile, Rahman is at 3.4. He's a guy who didn't even get close to fouling out in East Lansing when he came back in. He did foul out in Ann Arbor on Tuesday, although his 5th foul was an intentional foul. But your thoughts on this specific auto benching? I'm not going to say it cost them the game, but you have to wonder how things would have been different if Beilein had gone against what seems to be the norm and left Rahman in, at least brought him in sooner with 2 fouls in the first half.
Yeah, I mean, that's tough for a lot of reasons. I think the auto bench is something that I don't, especially for a guy who doesn't foul that often, is something that's probably not a great strategy, especially when you don't have a whole lot of time. You've basically enforced the penalty of not being able to play upon yourself anyways. He ended up playing 30 minutes in this game. I mean, with how thin Michigan is, I mean, ideally that's probably 38 if you add in Dokic's 8 minutes, or 32 if you add in Lonergan's 2 minutes. The one thing that I don't think Abdur-Rahman was going to do a whole lot in helping Michigan was play defense or rebound the ball. So, I mean, Michigan put up an elite offensive performance against this Michigan State team that has been the most efficient defensive team in conference play already. So, I mean, it had some effect on the game, certainly, but I don't think that it was make or break. I mean, his line and Aubrey Dawkins' line look probably similar to some degree, right?
Yeah, I mean, no, go ahead, sorry.
Sorry. So yeah, the strategy itself, I think, is certainly flawed. And at the end of the game, if you end up playing sort of a ragtag group, I mean, possessions at one point in the game are just as valuable as possessions at other points in the game. There's no reason why those incremental possessions are any more or less valuable at the very end, in my opinion, right? So yeah, I'm with, and it seemed like most of Michigan Twitter was right there as well.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the first half. Second half, Wolverines shot 42% for the half, 7 for 14 from three, compared to in the first half they were 1 for 8 from three and just 36% on total shots. So, but it's kind of like how I mentioned, in the second half, that you felt like if Michigan was going to get it to single digits, they get the crowd back into it. I think MSU really gut punched the crowd early on, and it never came back. And how much of the team's really undermanned. Maybe the crowd gets into it earlier. It gives them a little extra boost. I'm not saying they would have necessarily won the game. It obviously might not have affected MSU's interior prowess, but it just felt like a move that didn't give Michigan the best chance to win. And it's something that is one of perhaps the only complaint I think people would have about John Beilein's coaching. He obviously has done a great job there and always gets the best out of players. Rockman being an example, but it was just.
And you're sort of excusing the pre-Levert and Walton injury Michigan team, anyways, right? I mean, they did lose some bad games before any of those injuries. I mean, he does deserve some credit for pulling this team together with the parts that they've got now, but I think that they were underperforming before those injuries happened, right?
Sure. I mean, I think that's fair. Who knows how things would have turned around, though. You see what Purdue did in non-conference play and what they're doing now in Big Ten play when they kind of get on a roll. So, I mean, who knows? Levert was coming off-season surgery, so, I mean, who knows how things can be different. But Michigan, I think, is now 13-13 on the year. They're just pretty much their goal now is to pretty much just get an NIT berth. Michigan State's at 18-8, 9-4 in the conference, tied with Maryland and Purdue for that second place. Where are the Spartans at in terms of your DEF-CON rank, your DEF-CON rating right now?
Yeah, they're at a solid 4. I mean,
explain what that means again for people who might not know.
Sure. So, if anybody is curious too, there's a reference that I put together that actually uses Spartan Dan's descriptions, which I think are a little more thorough than what I'll probably tell you right now. But so it's just DEF-CON 1 being basically you got to win the conference tournament to get into the tournament. DEF-CON 2 meaning that you got to go on some sort of extended streak, winning some big games in order to get back on the right side of the bubble. 3 is directly on the bubble. If you win the games you're supposed to and lose the games you're supposed to, you'll be right at that cut line, maybe in the first 4 in or first 4 out. 4 means that you're solidly on the correct side of the bubble, but an upset loss or 2 could put you back down right on the cut line. And 5 means that you're just really solidly in. And so I don't think we've ever gotten down to 2 yet this year. I think post-Illinois loss, we were at DEF-CON 3. After the Ohio State win, we bumped up back to 4. This keeps us at 4. I think, so there's 5 conference games left, and probably 20 wins get you in, 21 to be safe, so 3-2 in these last 5 games, I would think would be a pretty solid way in, and to me that's probably about right. This team will probably go 3. And then who knows in the Big Ten tournament who you end up playing. But yeah, that's I think where this team is at right now. And these last 5 games are going to be really interesting for a lot of reasons, a lot of really interesting matchups.
Yeah, there are 5 games left. All opponents in the top 57 of KenPom right now. They've got a 78% chance in the KenPom projections. The home games against Minnesota and Purdue, who are very different in the Big Ten standings, but Minnesota's actually 1 spot ahead of Purdue, number 50 in KenPom's ratings. They're projected to go 21-10, which would, I think, obviously be safe enough. Now, I actually haven't looked at the Big Ten tournament bracket this year. How many teams? They instituted a double bye, is that right?
Yeah, so the way that that splits out is of the 14 teams, the bottom four teams all play on, I believe, Wednesday in order to get the field down to 12 teams, and then the top four teams get a double bye. So the bottom four teams will play on Wednesday, and then there will be the it's not the quarterfinals at that point, right? It's the round of eight or whatever,
Yeah,
and then
eighth finals or whatever.
right, exactly. So yeah, that'll be really interesting to see how that all kind of shakes out. I think it would actually, in some ways, be an advantage to not get the double bye. I think if you end up getting the double bye, you end up playing a team that's probably pretty good in that first game that you get to play in the quarterfinals. I being right at the top of the single bye would actually be ideal because then you get to play one of those bottom four teams that comes out of the bottom four games.
Yeah, it might depend.
So that's kind of what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, it might depend on
so,
who you are. MSU, I remember they opened with Iowa in 2011, and that was kind of one of those 50-50 type games that did a lot for them when they were right there on the bubble there.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, I mean, right now it's really jumbled. Spartan Dan's projections suggest that there's basically, I mean, it's Wisconsin for sure. Almost certainly Maryland is in there, and then there's basically it's Purdue, Michigan State. Who are the other teams that are up there?
Purdue, Maryland, Michigan State, and then I think right below you've got Ohio State.
Ohio State's in there, yeah.
And Iowa, I think, is right by them too.
Yeah, so it'll be an interesting race for that double bye. But again, I think that there's something to be said for getting one easy game, and then whatever happens in that second game, so long as you don't lose your very first one, you're probably in pretty good shape. But if you have to play, one of the top 8, whoever comes out of those first 2 rounds, you're going to end up playing a pretty decent team because despite sort of the relative weakness of the Big Ten, there are a bunch of teams that are relatively dangerous. I mean, I think Minnesota is one of the best examples of that. A team that lost a bunch of really tough games and is still pretty talented and could beat you on any given night. And that's why that game, when we play them here, it's about a week from now, right? We play them next Thursday. That game scares me for a lot of reasons. So it's going to be this little stretch run here is going to be really interesting. And I think the Purdue, it's Illinois plays at Purdue in both of their final regular season games.
That'll be a big one.
Yeah, that's going to be a huge one for the bubble, I think.
So yeah, Minnesota next Thursday. Not sure yet if we'll, based on kind of how this shapes up, if we'll be doing a podcast. Maybe Tuesday we'll try to get one in or something.
Sure.
If not, because then the next game is Wednesday. Kind of a hard time to fit one in because we try to record these so they got a good 2 days at least for people to listen before they're kind of old news. So sometimes, some weeks we haven't had them because the schedule's been kind of funky. But I think we're going to try to maybe do one early next week. Well, actually, first let's look at this Illinois game. Last time these teams met, Illini 59-54 win at Breslin. Beat up MSU on the boards at least for most of that game. Spartans maybe lost it at the free throw line. KenPom, this is pretty much a toss-up. 52% for the Spartans, 1-point MSU victory. Your thoughts on the next game, Joe?
Yeah, to me, this Illinois games and Minnesota too, to some extent, are both going to be really interesting referendums on this tum-tum train that we're on right now, because both Illinois and Minnesota have the size to exploit somebody like Tum Tum. And in that Illinois game, I mean, you saw all of their pretty big guards able to sort of bully some of the MSU guards into giving up good looks. And then the other issue now is that we don't have Javon Bess, one of the bigger wings that we had playing. I did like Marvin Clark didn't have a phenomenal game against Michigan, and I'm sort of Marvin Clark obsessed, I suppose. But he did, I think, play good on-ball defense against Zach Irvin, which I would think would be a pretty good sign for the potential for him playing a little more against Illinois and Minnesota and Wisconsin to some extent, teams that can run, three. We're going to be able to see Tum Tum, Trice, and Forbes all on the floor together in any of the upcoming 3 games. I do think that we're a better team than Illinois. This is a game that probably should be a win if they hit free throws. Should have been a win in East Lansing if they hit free throws. But yeah, it's going to be interesting because I just don't think that the lineups that worked against Northwestern, Ohio State, and Michigan are going to work against Illinois or Minnesota to the same degree. But,
yeah, I mean, Illinois has kind of always been a weird place for the Spartans to play. So last week we predicted, we all picked losses. We all picked a loss to Ohio State and a win against Michigan. So we got that half right. Although the Ohio State game obviously came down to the final possession. You going with a winner or a loss for the Spartans in Champaign, Joe?
I feel pretty good about this one. I mean, I think some lineup tinkering will have to happen, but I feel good that they'll come out with a win just because of the way that they've been playing recently, and I hope that they should play with an edge after losing at home to Illinois.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with the Illini. They're obviously fighting for right there on the bubble. It's always kind of been a tough place for the Spartans to play unless MSU's really been a good team or Illinois' been a bad team.
Yeah, it's a hard game to watch just because of the orange all over the place.
Also,
right?
I think Ravante Rice, he was out for the game in East Lansing, right?
Yes, he was, and he's back now.
Back now, so they've got a little bit more of a fuller lineup. So I'm going to go with the Illini, I think, in a close one. I think MSU probably is a better team, but I don't know if the matchup is very good for them. So we'll see that game Sunday at what time we got here? 7:30 p.m. Sunday night, which you don't often get. Big Ten Network, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time against Illinois. Before we wrap things up, Jeremy's not here, but I wanted to give a couple thoughts on the hockey team. They, in a huge series this past weekend, swept number 19 Penn State with a 3-0 win and a 3-2 win. Mackenzie McEachern with a hat trick in one of the games. And now kind of like basketball, there's a real cluster at the top of the standings, although there's only 6 teams in this conference. You've got Minnesota and Michigan are tied with 24 points each. Penn State and Michigan State are tied right behind them with 22 points each. Spartans still not in a great position for the NCAA tournament on the year. They're 12-12-2, but they're in the mix for the conference championship, and their schedule was kind of backloaded in the sense with the easy games because Wisconsin has been far and away the worst team in the league this year, 1-9-2 in conference play. Spartans haven't played them at all yet, but that's what they get this weekend. They go to Madison for 2 games, much like the Penn State games. I think both of them are must-wins if the Spartans want a chance at winning the Big Ten, because they finish with 2 of their last 3 series are against Minnesota and Michigan, 3 of those games on the road, sandwiched around 2 Wisconsin home games. So Wisconsin, for whatever reason, has been just really bad this year, and Spartans will need to come away with, I'm going to have to say, at least 4 points, 4 or 5 points out of a possible 6 in this weekend series. It doesn't look like they're on TV. They're not on TV Friday. Are they on TV Saturday? Saturday, no. Looks like neither game is.
It looks like they are.
Oh, no, you're right. Wait.
They're on BTN on Friday night.
Friday's BTN. Okay, you're right. Friday, BTN, 9 o'clock Eastern. They don't do a good job of showing this. Yeah, 9 o'clock Friday.
So, just for my uneducated hockey, mind, the Big Ten tournament is what'll determine whether or not who from the Big Ten essentially goes to the field.
Correct.
From what I understand from Jeremy, there's going to be very little chance for an at-large bid from the Big Ten, right?
Right, which is kind of weird because this was supposed to be, a big, powerful conference, but they've sort of beaten up on themselves a bit, and the top teams, Michigan and Minnesota, have not played like top teams all year, so this very well may be a one-bid league, in which case that Big Ten tournament, which is at Joe Louis Arena this year, will be key. But I don't think NCAA tournament was much of an expectation for this team based on how the last 2 years have gone and kind of the rebuilding they've had to do under Tom Manassas. But they're at 500 right now, and their schedule finishes somewhat favorably. And if they can finish the regular season above 500 going into the Big Ten tournament, I think it'd be a real sign of improvement. They looked really good against Penn State last week, and that's a Penn State program that was just a club team a few years ago. So the Spartan fans have kind of compared where this program is at to Penn State. If they fall behind Penn State, a team that was just a startup, it doesn't look good for Manassas. But they got the 2 wins there, which they needed to do on the year. They went two wins, 1 shootout win, and a regulation loss. So they've done their share against Penn State since the Big Ten has formed. But they'll have to. Penn State's got a difficult schedule to finish the year. They got 2 series against Minnesota. MSU has 2 series against Wisconsin. So the Spartans have a chance to make up ground there and really set the program up in a good spot, I think, going into next year. So Spartans have been on a pretty good run here. They've won 5 of 6 and 7 of 9 with a shootout win in there. So they've been kind of on a good stretch here, other than the only loss being that game at Soldier Field, which was kind of a train wreck, as we talked about before. But
that third weekend in March looks like it'll be fun. That's the Big Ten tournament, and also fingers crossed the first weekend of the NCAA tournament as well.
Oh, it's a good call, yeah. So it could be a lot of stuff going on for the Spartans there. And baseball, Eric, new Neil Colors contributor, put up an opening weekend recap. The Spartans won 2 games. What did they do? They beat. Who did they beat? They played Northwestern and.
Looks like New Mexico beat New Mexico, lost to Oregon State, and beat Northwestern.
Right. And Oregon State's a really, really good team. So, pretty good start for the Spartans. I'm not quite sure how they're expected to do this year. I've been following them in recent years. I covered them a few years ago when they won the Big Ten. So that's kind of getting started, as is the case with Big Ten teams. They start out, and I think MSU's in Arizona this year, down in Arizona, open up with a bit before they kind of make their way back up here for conference play when the weather warms up. So if you want to follow that, Eric's got some good stuff on the baseball team. Since Joe took over, he brought in some new contributors to write about some other stuff, so good stuff. So make sure you're always checking out theonlycolors.com for some good wide-ranging stuff. Joe, I think pretty much going to wrap it up here. You got anything else you wanted to add?
No, I just I'm pretty happy with the way that this basketball season has turned around in the last 10, 11 days, really. I mean, I was apoplectic after the Illinois loss, and the last 3 games really had me feeling pretty good. So.
Yeah, it's been a good stretch for the basketball team. Kind of, as has been the case all year, you never really know what kind of performance you're going to get, but they're in a good position now for the NCAA tournament, but as we've seen all year, they're capable of losing to and maybe beating anyone. So we'll have to see where things go. Maybe the next time we talk to you guys, maybe they'll be in an even better position, or maybe they'll kind of be back down. So who knows? So that's going to wrap it up here. Thanks for listening, as always. If you guys have any questions you want us to tackle, topics, issues with audio, or how you can listen, make sure you subscribe. I should do this at the beginning of the podcast. I always forget to do this. You can, although generally these people are getting it, you guys are getting it off the site anyway, so you know. But you can subscribe on iTunes. You can subscribe through the RSS. That way you can get it automatically downloaded to your phone. I know a lot of times it's easier listening to it that way. Maybe listen to it on your drive to or from work. It's generally how I kind of use them when I just have downtime. I'm doing stuff around the house. I listen to podcasts. So have a lot of fun doing this. Hope you guys enjoy it. If you guys have any, like I said, anything good, bad advice on how we can make it better, let us know. So that's going to do it here. Once again, I'm Chris Vanini. You can follow me on Twitter at Chris Vanini. And that is Joe Toohey. You can follow him on Twitter at Jobbin2E. So for Joe, this is Chris. Thanks for listening, and see you guys later.
Thanks.